Hello, everyone, and welcome to PAX 2022. My name is Nick Richardson, and welcome to the 2022 Storytime keynote. I want to begin today by also acknowledging the traditional owners of Naarm, the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, on which we gather today, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. Today, we have something truly special. Shuhei Yoshida is the head of PlayStation Indies and one of the most beloved faces in gaming. Over the course of his illustrious career, Yoshida's vision has brought to life iconic games such as Crash Bandicoot, Uncharted, Ratchet & Clank, God of War, and so many more. Stepping down from his role as president of worldwide studios of SIE in 2019, Shu has been leading an initiative looking after and nurturing external, smaller independent studios in his role as head of PlayStation Indies. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone gathered here today, please a big round of applause for Shuhei Yoshida.
Yeah. Hello. Hello. Wow, lots of people here.
Amazing.
Yeah.
They're all here for you. They don't
And
care
for
about
you
no,
as
they
well.
don't care about me at all. Who cares about Shu? An absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. This is a story time.
This is story time.
Yeah.
I hope you are ready to talk.
I hope you are too.
Well, I'm always ready to talk. And you and I spent 20 minutes talking backstage and had to be dragged back up here. So I'm glad we got the pleasantries out of the way because we have so much to cover. And unfortunately, we only have an hour to do it. So I want to start off with asking, is this your first time coming to Australia?
This is not.
It's not?
Actually, for Melbourne, the last time I was here was 38 years ago.
Oh, wow.
38 years ago. Who was not born? So I was 20 years old, and I was at the college in Kyoto, and I had the opportunity to do internship in Brisbane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I stayed there for 6 months. That's a beautiful place, and yeah, because I never had experience outside Japan. The coming to Australia was my first trip outside Japan. So.
Yeah.
It had a huge impact on me because back in 1980s, Japanese people were like workaholic, right? They worked really hard, the economy was booming.
Yeah. And here we're incredibly lazy and always drunk. So.
No, well, somewhere in between. Yeah, so I was anticipating, I was in college, preparing to go into work in Japan, but what I learned, I worked in accounting firm in Brisbane, and the people here at that time, at least, they enjoyed life. The work-life balance. Every Friday, at 5 p.m., the director, one of the director of the company, brought the cart full of alcohol.
Yep.
And we were not allowed to keep working.
Yeah.
Everybody has to stop, working and start drinking and talking, and people moved on to the, pub crawling.
You get the most authentic Australian
Yeah,
experience.
so I learned a lot of life lessons,
Yeah.
and made friends, and so when I come back to Australia, every time I feel like I'm back at home in kind of way. So that had a huge impact on me. I learned how to enjoy life, and probably that prepared me to take an opportunity to work in California later in the years. California are kind of similar, very open, optimistic, having fun kind of culture, and I like staying here. So
I think that's the first time anyone has compared Brisbane to California.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, but, like the 3 Brisbane people here will take it for sure, though.
Oh yeah, well, Queensland is great,
There you go.
isn't it?
So how have you been enjoying Melbourne? Because you came here last Sunday.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you've been here for Games Week. So what have you been doing? What's been your sort of PAX Games Week experience so far?
Yeah, so I've been a huge fan of indie games, but I have never been to PAX Australia. People recommended me to come all the time, but because of COVID, I didn't have chance. I waited for 3 years, and finally I'm here, and I had an hour before this talk to spend time, walking around. Sorry, I cut short the line because I got a VIP pass.
Of course.
And I found, great, booth of OUS Indie Showcase area, great games, and also PAX Rising. PAX Rising is a great area in PAX West as well, but it's much smaller. Here it's gigantic. It's like a main event.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, so there are great indie games, here to show off. And yeah, so because on the other hand, the presence of publishers are more limited. And our friend, developer has a small booth, and they are always great to come over here. I was talking with Graham. He said because he loves Australia and PAX Australia, so they come here every time. So check out developer booths as well.
I can't imagine there'd be a bunch of indie devs and probably a lot in the audience right now showing off their games, and they're like, oh, it's going to be so exciting because some people are going to be able to like test play a game and maybe add it to their Steam wishlist, and then Shu just walks through the game area. Like, if I would melt, I would die. I don't know what I would do. So
even when I was managing first party, I always went to the indie area of the game event, and when I saw some games that I liked, I took photos with the developer and tweeted because I have lots of followers.
And you're tweeting all the time.
Yeah. So I try to help promote the game.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to do that today and tomorrow as
Phenomenal. Well, that transitions beautifully into the first part of this. We're talking about your role as head of indie at PlayStation. You've been there for nearly 3 years now, and I think it's been a pretty eventful 3 years for multiple reasons. How have you found the last couple of years in your new role?
The first 2 years and this year are very different.
Yeah.
But let's start from the beginning. So toward the end of 2019, Jim Ryan, our CEO and president of Sony Interactive Entertainment, Jim and I are talking, and Jim was talking about the new plan for the studio. I was doing managing the studios for a long time, and Jim was saying that, well, in 2018 and 19, toward the end of the PS4, we had great, launch period of PS4. We showcased, indie games. We had lots of indie developers on the stage of E3 shows, and we are big fans, and we made lots of friends. But toward the end of PS4 era, the company somehow was seen to focus more on the first party and AAA, and I was doing first party, so I was getting the benefit of that. But I was also concerned at the same time that the people start to saying that PlayStation may not be supporting indies anymore, which it was not true, but we were seen like that. And I was talking with Jim, and Jim said that's the concern. And I said to Jim, you should do something. And Jim was like, I want you to do something.
I think you should do something.
You should do something.
You got a problem, you go fix it.
Yeah, I do it. Yeah, so that's how I got this new role. Jim that created my role, and because I work with Jim directly, I can work with all the parts of the company. So what I did the beginning of the time. And also, we are very lucky to have, Greg Rice from Double Fine about the same time. Greg might be here.
Yeah.
Stand
Greg
up,
Rice.
Greg.
A round of applause for Greg Rice.
Greg will be one of the tallest persons here. So
he's the giant wandering around the show floor
Greg,
with the long
Greg
hair.
and I worked together on the PlayStation Indies initiative. The first thing we did was to listen to our partners, our developers and publishers, what they are saying, what they are having problems, working with PlayStation, what they want us to do. And we also, I was also listening to the people inside the company. They are, all parts of the company, like a PR group, store group, marketing group, third-party relations group, operations group. They all touch upon the life of, indie developers. And, people who are working day to day, they have ideas, they have some ideas, but sometimes, they feel that they are not empowered to do things, or they are not, resourced enough to be able to do so. I spoke with all these groups and, gathered, the best ideas from these teams and came up with some, very in simplified manner. I figured what we should do is two things. One is the indie games. There are so many games created and published these days. So, because we are looking at games in development before comes out, and we have those intelligence, we should curate the best and best of indie games coming out on the platform and showcase them and promote them, help promote them, and make these developers who made these amazing games to be successful on the platform. That's really, really important. At the same time, as we do so, well, people, PlayStation fans will have easier time to find, great games on our store or on our channel. And what we found at that time was each department that I talked about, they are doing that job. They are looking at, games coming up, but they are not necessarily talking, sharing the ideas and information with each other. And we have the global organization of third-party relations team, like Greg Rice's team. He has lots of stuff in Europe, in Japan, and in the US. They have amazing knowledge of games. They are always talking to developers and publishers for the upcoming games, and they receive, and I receive the games in development and have a chance to play and sometimes give feedback to them. So one of the teams have amazing knowledge of the games coming up, but other teams are not necessarily being shared that knowledge. So when every team has make a choice, we wanted to make sure that the intelligence that part of the company has been shared by all the other parts of the company, so that each department can make an informed choice when they promote games that they do. So that's one top of the kind of pyramid. But there are hundreds of games coming out, and many of games are great. So all the others that we are not necessarily be able to kind of hand curate or help with a human touch, we really, really, really need to improve the systems and tools that we provide. And so that's a huge endeavor, because historically, PlayStation, I don't know if you realize, that was a very strong regional headquarters company. US and Japan and
so siloed,
Europe. Siloed, and there's a good strength in that. Each group has very strong local connections and local taste. But as business and industry become more connected and more digital, it's just a natural progression for the company to become more regional to the global organization. So what had happened was, when back in the days, or even now in some extent, the developers and publishers making games for PlayStation had to talk to 3 different companies and had to learn 3 different systems and tools and register for different payments, or ask for the vouchers from 3 different groups.
All for like distributing codes. And
It's a nightmare if you are working on multi-platform. It's like having 3 platforms on one. And so we have been working towards making it globalizing and simplifying and making it easier to understand. But as we transition from PS4 to PS5 generation, we are still in the transition in time. We have global great tools, publishing tools now for PS5, but most of the developers are still making games on both PS4 and PS5. So on the PS4 side, they still have to use some legacy tools, and so it's a transitioning time. We are asking them to be patient and give us feedback. To it's a long talk, but so on one hand, we really want to focus on showcasing great games on PlayStation, and but on the other hand, for all the developers on the platform, we want to make it much easier, simpler to work on the platform, so that they can focus on making games, instead of trying to understand how to work with PlayStation. And so that's the two major things that we set out to do, and we've been working with all parts of the company for the 3 years. So but this year is totally different, because the event has come back. Yeah. We conquered the COVID, right?
Yes, we did it.
Yeah,
we did it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
well done.
Yeah. We all got COVID, so we are now,
exactly.
immune. So this year, the meeting, events for indie is so important, right? Showing off games, and sometimes, journalists or influencers like yourself come and check out and become fans of the games, or may get, funding or the contact, or to watch, people play your games for the first time. And there are lots of learning to do. So, so we really wanted to go visit real events. Online events are fine. Sometimes it's good for, when I talk to publishers and developers in like Southeast Asia, for them to go to like GDC in California is super expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but if it's online events, they can just submit their, trailers and.
And you were saying backstage that I think 10, 12 different events, conferences and stuff that you've been to this year so far?
This year, we are at DICE event in Las Vegas, GDC in California, and BAFTA was really fun, and WASD was a great consumer event part, and I was invited to talk at the Brazilian Indie Game Festival.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, BIGB Festival. It was super fun. Those, regions like South Latin America or Southeast Asia, the developers are growing up. So every year we are seeing better games, and these indie-focused events are becoming bigger. And after that, we are at BIS Summit in Kyoto. BIS Summit is an amazing event. I highly recommend you to come. It's in Kyoto, so it's a great destination.
I'll just tell them you invited me, and I'll just turn up, and we'll see what
it's
happens.
It's an international show. There are many industry people who are big fan of BIS Summit. Maybe BIS Summit and the PAX Australia are the two favorite, for some of the people, like Graham from Devolver, he was saying. So we at BIS Summit, we had a booth there. It's really fun to have booths, along with other companies like Nintendo. We are friends, and we are at Gamescom in Germany. It has come back, and PAX West was great. PAX West felt like 75% PAX.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like everyone here, I've been walking around this morning and have done a couple events and stuff already, and just everyone is so stoked to be back. There could literally be no video games on the floor, and people are like, oh, I'm just excited to be around everyone again. I'm excited to see my friends and just hang out with fellow gamers. So when you stepped down from your role as head of Worldwide, you could have
we are still at the topic number one, aren't we?
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. We knew this was going to happen. You could have done anything. I did read an interview from you from, I think it was like 2010 or something, and you were saying you don't understand why people are only focused on AAA games, because there's so much excitement, so much opportunity and experimentation in the indie space. What is it about indie games that has excited you, that drew you to this in the first place?
Yeah, so as I said, I've been a huge fan of indie games, even when I was managing, first-party studios, and we had a huge fortunate to work with some of the most creative people when we launched, PlayStation Network in 2006 with PS3. We worked with young teams like That Game Company, who created game, like Journey, an amazing, beautiful game. So let me go back. So I've been with the start of PlayStation, the very first one. I joined Ken Kutaragi's team in 1993, February.
Wow.
1993. So maybe some of you were not born.
And what were you doing there at the time?
Yeah, so the Ken's team was just all of them were engineers, just developing the very first PlayStation. And as the company Sony at the time decided to move that into business, they started gathering people. And I was lucky enough to join Ken's team as the first non-technical person there. And before the Sony Computer Entertainment was formed. So when the company was formed late that year, 1993, I was employee number 32.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the whole company was 80 people.
My gosh.
And so my role was like a lead account manager for the publishers in Japan. So we visited Japanese publishers and we showed demos of like dinosaurs and, I don't know if you've seen 3D real-time graphics.
Yeah, of course.
Was our strength. And they are like, that's great, but, Sony, there are many electronics companies try to join video game industry, but it's very different, and it's gonna be very hard. So good luck. Yeah, but we found friends with company like Namco who are doing great 3D games on arcade, and there are like a PC developers in Japan who are doing 3D graphics games on PC. So we found these allies, and they are so excited to work on PlayStation. And PlayStation at that time was PS1 days. We brought the CD-ROM as a medium.
Yeah.
And before that generation were cartridges, right? And the cartridges are very, very expensive to make. And publishers has to spend a fortune to publish one game, and they have to wait for 2 months or so to be manufactured.
Yeah.
So if you missed your estimate of your game's popularity, the game's sold out, and
you wait
don't
2
have
months for another run, yeah.
Or you manufacture too many, so you have to dump the price.
You need to bury ET.
Yeah. So very, like that. So very, very difficult market consumer, console for developers to get their games out. But we brought the CD-ROM. That's much quicker, just a couple of days to make, and the cost of goods is super cheap. It's just like a printing. So we are able to reduce the amount of money the publishers has to have to release a title. So that brought in a lot of new publishers into the market, and along with that, lots of new game creators. Like Matsuura-san was a professional musician, who created Parappa the Rapper. Yeah. So those, games of that time were done by very tiny team, like less than 10 people, like Naughty Dog.
Even
was
smaller than Sony at the time. 80.
Yeah. We are like started as 80 people, and developers are very small. Like Naughty Dog made Crash Bandicoot with like 8 people.
Yeah.
And I was a producer for Japanese market. So there are lots of interesting games being created because there are so many new creators came in, and their new, the cost of the entry was much lower. So that was the first experience of us, as PlayStation, along with bringing in technological innovation like 3D graphics, brought down the entry barrier for the game creators to be release game. So there's many interesting, weird, games, developed on PlayStation, and we are huge fan of these new ideas. So from the very beginning, we are huge fan of creative new ideas, games that create a new genre. So when the indie boom started around the 2000, when the digital distribution happened on all platforms, PC, mobile, and console, and the cost of entry has even lowered, because there's no cost of goods, on the digital. I was like, yeah, this is it, So, so I was a big fan of indies, and we had the fortune to work with, small developers to release as first party some of the best, indie games of that time. So when I had a chance to do help the company to refocus on how we can better support indies, I was super excited.
And so what was it about, because you mentioned the Brazil Games Festival
Yeah.
before, and how different regions have their own identities, and before the company was sort of siloed and then it sort of became globalized, but I feel like part of the great thing about indies is that it can really express local cultures so well.
Absolutely.
That so many different countries have different kinds of games that they make. What is it like in the Japanese indie scene, and how does that compare to something like Australia?
Yeah, so Japan is pretty interesting because Japan had always had big publishers and making great games historically, and there are strong media groups like Famitsu, Dengeki, covering video games. So and most of the so Japan, in short, Japan was very late in the game in terms of finding and enjoying indie games. And part of that is Japan is very console heavy and console and mobile heavy market. Now the popularity of PC games is growing, but back in the days when the indie boom was happening, they are very tiny, PC market. So the best indie games made in the Western, regions didn't noticed, didn't get noticed in Japan, and media didn't cover this game. They have strong ties of Japanese publishers, and if you are a PR person in Japanese publishers, you work with these media to secure the pages on Famitsu or something.
Yeah, right.
So it's very hard for the small indie games to be noticed in Japan, and in Japan at the same time is a culture. That's changing now, but historically, the people tend to stay in the same company for a long time. People value that kind of stability and working with the same people for many, 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 many years. So the culture is not that entrepreneurial. So when you join a great company like Capcom or Square Enix, when you say that, well, I wanna make my own video game developer and release my own game, your parents may say that, what happened? You should stay with that great company. You are crazy. So that prevented kind of seeing many successful indie developers from Japan. But the things are changing now. For one, people are finding games not through the conventional media. People are finding games like your channel, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And these, you do not care if it's a big game or small game, as long as people enjoy watching your show.
Yeah.
So that's had a huge impact for people in Japan to find great indie games through streamers, YouTubers, and at the same time, money is now available. Someone said, like Lizzie said, there's a weird money now available. Yeah. So that's coming to Japan as well. So the people who are experienced developers in Japanese publishers are now getting the opportunity to become independent and well-funded and well-supported and creating new indie games. So it's really, really exciting to see even major publishers like Konami had an indie game show inside their headquarters building in Tokyo. Isn't it amazing? They had a competition to ask indie developers in Japan to propose to make a new game based on their old arcade arcade IPs. And so they found that indie developers will bring in the new, fresh ideas and passion to the IP that they are no longer supporting. So they held indie game event by themselves. So the things are much changing now. So Bit Summit had a huge role to push that. They are one of the earliest to push that from Kyoto. There are many Western developers working in Kyoto because they love to be in Kyoto, and they are the ones started this summit actually, along with some local Japanese developers in Kyoto, and they brought their friends from media people in the West,
Yeah.
and those people also, many of them in the industry, surprise, love Japanese culture, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So they came to the summit. They started covering games from the summit. So the Bit Summit had a huge role in spreading the indie game.
The indie culture.
Yeah,
there.
in Japan. So it's gonna be great for the coming 2 or 3 years. You'll see more games coming from.
That's really exciting.
that region.
And so with Australia, I mean, a game that you and I both loved that came out this year, Cult of the Lamb, as just being, I don't know if you've played Cult of the Lamb.
Game of the year.
Massive monster, incredible. I know that you really got behind it as well. What is it that interests you about the Australian indie scene and games like that?
Well, yeah, so I have a particular feeling about Cult of the Lamb before I generalize about Australian development. So we have friends
That it's super messed up and there's something wrong with us?
Well, yeah, so we are very friendly.
Yes.
We are friendly with their publisher, Devolver Digital,
Yep.
and Devolver is good at giving us, card early in development. So we had, chance to play games early. And what I found that game in particular amazing, work was, if you have played the game, usually action game. I love action games like, roguelike, Souls-like. And when I play these games, when you beat the boss or be beaten by the boss, it's a time that game tells you, now you can, stop playing.
You can rest.
Yeah. But when you finish that in Cult of the Lamb and come back to your base,
Yep.
there are lots of people waiting for you, right?
Yeah.
And I have to do this, do this, do this. So there's no chance to stop playing. That the game loop that they developed, that's an amazing idea.
Well, it's very difficult running a cult. So it's a full-time job. I don't know if you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, but you still have to go to dungeon, right?
You still need to do the runs, yeah. It's
Yeah.
And I think the beautiful thing about that game was just when you felt like you had your fill of one half of that, then the other half came up. So it wasn't even the idea that now there's something else to do. It's there's something different to do that is almost diametrically opposed to what you were doing for 15 minutes before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
So I felt in terms of that game loop, Cult of the Lamb, I felt was like a perfect game. Well, it wasn't perfect when the game came out. There's some bugs, but they have been fixing these. So now it's great time to. Why silence? Sorry. Praise the Lamb.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I learned this week was there's amazing, support. Well, community here. Developers help each other and know each other. Everyone seems to know each other very well, and amazing support from the government or big screen. These support at the very beginning of the project is precious because when you start a project and you get money to support, that encourages you to experiment, right? To try to do something unproven. So I was at the Parallels event last night. There are presentations of games that, very unique, interesting ideas. So I think that has brought the fruit of games that are very unique in gameplay or the theme. And that, I think, is the core strength of indie scene here in Melbourne or Australia.
Yeah, the identity. There's so many really strong, unique ideas that are so different to everything else. I totally agree. What are your top tips for an Australian dev here watching now to be featured on PlayStation with their indies?
So we are always look out for new games in development. So we try to come to the event, check out the online shows on the social media. We really like to see games early, and we have team of people here. Like I talked about Greg Rice, and next to Greg is Liz Mercury and Louise Spera. Can you stand up? So so special bonus
Yeah.
is they are here. So
So
talk
swarm
to
them later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talk to them, get their business card, and show your games to them. So yeah, we like to see and play games early, and we when we find some games, one of us get excited. We try to champion that game inside the company, and there are people who are very key in the company, like who makes a decision what games to be on our YouTube channel or
Yep.
blog post or
The
state of
monthly picks
play,
or something. And,
monthly picks on the store. These people listen to us, and they react to us or them, our people who are really excited about. Yeah, so we have the team of people who are very excitable. Like when you meet Luis Spera, he's such an excitable guy. So that's important, right?
Yeah.
That's really important, and we value, at PlayStation, because we only do games. So people who work at PlayStation tend to love games, and that's why they came to us. So when we talk about the games that's in development and not necessarily being seen outside or not being broadly shown, they are like, what is this?
yeah. Because you're as excited as someone else to get hands on something early that someone
Yeah.
hasn't seen and
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
know is going to be fantastic.
And we know that there's no way for us to know everything, right? Because hundreds games being created. So please try to reach out to us, show us, and so that we can find you.
And so, what are you doing? What are your plans for the development of indies on PlayStation in the distant and sort of further future? You talked about how there was this restructuring within the internal part of the company. What are you doing to help developers in the future? What are you excited about implementing?
Yeah. So big efforts, like two areas of big efforts are the development publishing systems that I talked about, because the system development takes years to develop, and we have been developing new systems and implementing new systems. I talked about the new publishing tools for PS5. That's global and great, much greater, better. And we introduced the new systems, for analytics tool. When you publish a game on PlayStation, every day you see how your games is performing. The sales of units, revenue, or how long people spend, hours, on your game, or even before the launch, how many people wishlisted your games, or trophy, acquisition. These tools are now very well, implemented, advanced, and is available for every publishers on the system. And we also introduced a new voucher system, global voucher system, that you can ask for the vouchers for all regions from just one point. That's a big improvement. And we are trying to work on the self-service marketing tool system, because there are so many people making games, and we have very strong channel like blog, YouTube, Facebook, or Meta. Instagram, and channel, lots of people come to watch. So we like publisher developers submit their games and news, and we choose what we feel most relevant to our audience. So, but we are trying to make that system easier to use. What else? We are trying to make the games more easier to discover on the store.
Yeah.
That's really key. Discoverability is a keyword that we've been working for a long time, and we are planning for the future. We'd like to see everyone has different taste, right? And in theory, and I think in reality, we should know every PlayStation player's history of playing games, what kind of types of games you like, So we should be able to showcase the best games that you would be interested in. That will help, discoverability of many, many indie games.
Absolutely.
So we are working on systems that will help all games from, big titles to, smallest titles. And that's our longer term goal to implement. We are doing, small things, like adding new game strand, or, we are doing monthly picks. It's a very, very popular feature on the PlayStation Store. Every month, we get together, like, people who are the most knowledgeable of games people, and we have a live, like, Excel sheet of games that have come out, and we pick 20 games every month that came out the previous month to showcase.
And how much of an argument is that? Like, how heated does that get?
Oh yeah, well, it can be heated, but maybe 15 out of 20 games are indie games, and the third-party relations teams are the most knowledgeable about these indie games, so their opinions are very well appreciated by the store team. And there are some regional differences as well, especially in Japan. The tastes are pretty different, so the set of 20 games are customized to different regions as well. But in the end, the curator on the store has the final
Pulls rank.
decision making, and we all respect their role. So.
And so I wanted to talk about PlayStation VR, because you were heavily involved with the original PSVR. What role do you see indies playing in PSVR 2?
What I expect so I was very, very involved in the first PSVR, the development of a system itself. It was like a grassroots movement.
Like an indie console within the company.
Inside the company, it was like a PS3 era. When I visited Santa Monica Studio, they are making, God of War on PS3, and one of the programmer and one of the producers asked me to come, and they put me the handmade headset. And when I had it, I was in God of War world. And I looked down, I was Kratos. That's an amazing experience. So they are playing with the new tech that we launched, the Move controller. PS Move has a really accurate tracking of where the controller is. So by attaching that to the video display headset, you are able to track your head movement. And that's connected to PS3, and PS3 can render based on where you are looking at. So that's a handmade, my first VR experience on PS3. And this is amazing. And
had you been into VR before that? Had you as an idea?
Well, I was aware of VR boom in 1990s. There are movies, but I was not that, involved or anything like that. But actually, it's really funny, when in the 90s, when there's a VR game, like a publisher like Namco was selling the Ridge Racer, saying that this is the best virtual reality experience or something. So we are. I was familiar with VR, but that God of War experience was my first ever experience of VR. And our studios talk to each other. They show like things, and the fire spread, amongst different studios, and the hardware team, R&D team was also experimenting, and the company noticed, and the company agreed that let's make VR system for PS4. Because virtual reality requires lots of performance, and that was about the time that the Oculus was being formed and started to show games behind the closed door. So because it was like we are like hobbyists. So every event we met with people from Oculus or HTC and showed each other's games, and it was super fun. So because that VR, consumer VR, the first generation in 2016, we all launched the systems. That was driven by these passionate people who wanted these system, virtual reality system at consumer level, it was less about the big company. It was more about smaller team who are super passionate, who've been waiting to make VR games. So job simulators and these amazing games created by small young teams and so the time has passed, the technology has advanced, and it's much, much better, graphically or response-wise, interactions. And our system even has the gaze tracking. So, imagine you are in the VR and you are talking to, some game characters. When you see eye to eye, you might want to punch me or, so it's amazing. Yeah. So what I expect is these, indie developers who have ideas, who want to try, make use of these new things that they can do, will do something amazing.
I'm very excited for PSVR 2 as well. With you were talking before about the idea of getting games early and getting eyes on and getting internally excited about things. What are some games coming up that you are really excited to share with people? What's some of the stuff on your radar that you can't wait for us to play?
Well, personally, I've been waiting for this small game called No Longer Home, coming out pretty soon on PlayStation. The game came out on PC last year. It's a game about two young people, at college in UK, living together, but after the graduations, they had to be separated because one of the two couldn't get the visa to stay in London. So in order for them to keep connected, they decided to make a game about their experience, their life in London. So that's a beautiful game that's coming soon to PlayStation, I believe. So that's one. And the other games, I'm super excited to the game called Chia. It's TCHIA. It's a beautiful game, made by a developer in France, but the key developers came from New Caledonia, and the game is set in an island in New Caledonia. It's very beautiful, waters, and it's sandbox action game. The music, culture, food, based on that locality, beautiful game. I cannot wait for Cheer, and also another game called Season, another beautiful game. It's like post or pre-apocalyptic time when the Earth is dying. Before that happens, you are tasked to record everything, like take photos of beautiful scenery or record the sound.
That sort of like chill core thing is really big in indies right now. What sort of trends are you seeing in indie games at the moment that seems to be working and exciting people?
Oh yeah, so because indies love make games that they want to make, right? Yeah, so the all kinds of games, but and of course they are popular genre like roguelike or Souls-like, that I love. But these story-driven games are very 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 beautiful games. And another very personal like stories being told in these games I really like.
Do you think that's a big opportunity with indies to be able to tell personal stories and people are more willing to listen to smaller stories as well?
I think so, yeah, because these personal stories people associate themselves, right?
Yeah.
So it's a representation, and big games have to talk to millions of users, so they lots of people touch that game and try to polish it. But the smaller games can be, made for certain, group of audience, or including the developers themselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so you do you have a lot of time to play video games since you are traveling everywhere all the time? What sort of stuff are you playing at the moment? What games are you into right now?
Yeah, so this August and September has been amazing, time to play indie games. Great games came out on just on PlayStation. In August, we had a game called Gigabash from the developer in Malaysia,
Yep.
Passion Republic. It's their first original game. We've been, as a first party, big studio like Naughty Dog, Insomniac, Sucker Punch, they've been working with Passion Republic. They are like a top-notch outsource developer in Southeast Asia. But they are now, it's about time for us to use our talent to create an original title. So they published the game Gigabash. It's a monster kaiju superhero fighting game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. And of course, Cult of the Lamb came out, and the Inscription, it's my personal game of the year 2021.
Mine as well. Oh my god, I was
Yeah,
so
came
obsessed.
out on PlayStation.
Yep.
It's amazing game. I played through again on PlayStation, and I loved it again. It's great, highly recommended. And on the Souls-like game called Cymacia,
Yep.
I think developed by developer in Taiwan.
Yeah, it has a sort of Bloodborne vibe.
Yeah. It's great. It's really good.
I know you're not going to answer this, but are we getting another Bloodborne?
That's a long question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
you
just,
should.
yeah.
Yeah, that's Herman Hurst.
Yeah,
he's the right
that one
person
just
to-
hurts. I just need that to happen at some point.
Yeah.
The boundary between AAA games
Yeah.
and indie games is really blurred right now. What sort of lessons do you think that AAA can learn from indie? Because I think that indie has managed to take great lessons from AAA and also ditch a lot of things that don't work for them. So how do you think that can work in
Yeah. So
reverse?
when you talk to like a big studio people, like Naughty Dog people and these people, they love indie games. They play lots of indie games, and they feel they get inspired by these playing these indie games because big titles takes a long time to make, lots of people involved. And yeah, so they can play their games, or they're playing their games every day, but they can release their games only once every many years. And while doing so, things move on. The new ideas come in, new developers come in. The best. There's a saying in the industry I always love is that you are only as good as your last game.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always new people come in, and you may have made a great game before. You have to keep working, yeah, because there's always newcomers come and steal the best game of the year from you, right? So yeah, they are learning a lot from these ideas, and there are many new things are being tried by indie developers that these people, creative people in the large studios are watching.
Do you think there's opportunities for those AAA studios to make smaller games? Because, like you said, indies at the moment are at a space where something like Hades can just be basically across the board game of the year for so many people. That sort of thing. Inscription, same situation. Do you think that there's opportunities for big studios to be making multiple smaller titles?
Well, yeah, many studios do like the like internal competition to gather new ideas from their own people, and sometimes that becomes a real project.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the ideas are always sought after from the people inside the large studios. The question is, the publishing side might not be equipped to handle smaller games. It depends on publishers. Nowadays, big publishers some of them started to have a separate label to handle, like private divisions.
Yeah.
Like Square Enix also has different. So it's happening, but it depends on the publisher how they are set up to be able to handle these smaller games. And the marketing big games are very different skill set.
Absolutely. And so we're nearly out of time, like we're basically done. But I do have a question here that we wanted to know, which was, what is your favorite game ever? Like if you had to just pick one video game that you played for the rest of your life, or that you could only recommend to people, which one would that be?
Well, I can recommend, and I always say that Journey is my personal favorite.
Yeah.
And I was so fortunate to be involved in the supporting the team to make the game. The game you can play it for only maybe 2 or 3 hours, and there's no dialogue or no UI. But when you start playing that game, you know what to do, and you meet with other characters that may be someone who's playing the game on the other part of the world. And when you play, the game is about the life of a person. And when I was playing the game, and I was remembering my grandmother who had passed away a couple of years before. And so the game was one of the first to kind of sweep the game of the year of every single like award show against over AAAs. That's the power of game that can create emotions in the people who play the game, and that game helped many people who lost some people who are important for them in life by playing the game and remembering the person that you lost. And Geneva Chen, who was the game director, said that they received lots of letters like that, telling him how much the game helped their life. So that's my favorite game.
And that's, I mean, that is a beautiful place to end it. The power of video games, particularly indies, to be able to tell those sort of personal, intimate stories. Please, a round of applause for Shu.
Thank you.
An absolute pleasure having you here. Enjoy the rest of PAX.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the show.